Hello and welcome to Pest in Class, expert voices in pest management. I'm your host, Amanda Salvatore, and today we talk with John Ely, owner of ProCare Pest Services in Atlanta, Georgia. We discussed his journey into owning his own business, the principles of door-to-door sales, and how pest, at its heart, is a relationship-based industry. Let's get into it. John Ely, you are the owner of ProCare Pest Services in Atlanta, Georgia. We're going to talk today about your ups and downs with starting your own business and your experience and success in door-to-door sales. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Good.
Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
of course, of course. Let's get into it. Let's dive right in. I do a little bit of an icebreaker, a little get to know you for our listeners. So yours is, if you could choose to have any superpower, which would it be?
I would have to say, I always think to X-Men, like Charles Xavier being able to read minds. That has its cons, though, being able to know people's thoughts. Could have a lot of
Yeah,
bad things. But from a sales perspective, it would be really nice to know what they're thinking. Since
yes. But
that's
you know what?
my
I
world.
respect it. I respect that. Truly, I would just fly because I live in Los Angeles and it's kind
Yeah.
of lame. I just need a way to deal with traffic. And I think
Not scared
that's,
of heights, then.
yeah.
You're good with heights.
You know, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
Get
okay with
used to it, maybe, if you can fly.
yeah, yeah. I don't mind being in an airplane,
Okay.
but I don't know how I would be just, you know,
Yeah.
just me. But
Yeah.
luckily enough, I'll never know. But reading minds, an excellent choice for business. We'll stick it to
Yes.
just in a
That's
business
what
sense.
I'm yeah, that's what I connected. There's some cool hero powers I could pick, but when it comes to work, that would be a nice one to have.
Absolutely. Are you Marvel? Are you DC? Are you not into superhero movies?
No, if I had to pick Marvel, although Superman and Batman were my favorite as a kid,
Sure.
DC side, but Spider-Man was kind of in that list too. And yeah, just Marvel definitely makes the better heroes and better movies anyways. So.
I agree. I agree. All right, so let's get into it. How did you get into pest management?
So I was like anyone else, just kind of got, they say if you don't go looking for pest control, it finds you. And so it found me in Rexburg, Idaho. I was going to school, BYU, Idaho. I went out there, did a semester there, did a mission for my church, came back, and that's why a lot of door-to-door companies recruit out of there. They got a lot of return missionaries. And I think it's a mix of the skill set you learn, talking to people for 2 years. I say, hey, if you can talk about Jesus for 2 years, you could maybe sell something. So I was approached by a couple buddies that had done really well while I was gone on my mission, and I'd come home, worked some typical server jobs, and then I guess they had approached me, and I said, well, if I could at least make 10,000 in 4 months, that's faster income than what I'm making basically right now. So yeah, I just figured I'd give it a shot.
How was starting in door to door? I feel like I did improv in New York City and I have performed with Tony Award winning actors, and I have zero interest in knocking on someone's door. It is really a terrifying idea to me. So how was that experience for you?
So for me, I went to Seattle, which if I were to do it again, I would have gone into somewhere. I love Seattle. My parents are actually from Washington, so it was kind of a cool thing because I had a lot of family there. We had all kinds of just connections with Seattle that my family. So my parents were really excited I was going there, and family was excited I was coming. But it rained the first really 2 months every single day. It was cold. And Seattle just doesn't have a lot of pest population. Now there's definitely a need there. They have a lot of rodents, found like a lot of spiders. I always did really well when I sold around the lakes because the houses would be covered in spider webs. So I love selling around a lot of the lakes they have there. But yeah, I thought I would do really well. I got out there, I'd done a mission, talked to people for a couple of years. I was like, I could do this. As long if I believe in it, I can do it. And so I believed in what the company was offering, at the time. And so I went out and sold nothing for 2 weeks. So I kind of got to a point where I said, maybe this isn't for me. But I was really grateful for what I'd learned. Actually, at the end of my first 2 weeks, I was like, man, the education I've gotten in learning about sales and people is definitely worth it to me, even if I don't walk home with a good paycheck. So it took me some figuring out, and I ended up doing the best on my team by the end of it. So I figured it out. So the story didn't end there, I guess. We knocked through the summer. I ended up with about just 270 customers, which was good for the team there. And I think good for a lot of most people's first year. Was probably above average, but Seattle definitely was a tough market to learn in, especially where it was just so cold and rainy, and they get slugs, rodents, and spiders and carpenter ants. But other than that, wasn't a lot to kind of lean on to try to convince people to do it. And it was no one really had a company. I would meet some people here and there that had like typically Orkin or Terminix, some of the bigger names in the industry, but not a lot of people that had a guy that I could switch over. So.
Sure. So what I'm hearing is that in the beginning it was a bit of a rocky start, and then you started figuring it out. So where did that switch happen where you went from 2 weeks nothing into being the superstar of the team, essentially?
Yeah, and I'm very competitive, so I didn't like being at the bottom. Didn't sit well with me.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
I was giving it my best, and I was getting frustrated. Part of it didn't help me that I tried to do a 14 credits while selling door to door, and I didn't realize I was going to be out there 12 hours. So I was slowly dropping classes as the summer progressed because I couldn't handle it all. I was staying up too late, wasn't getting enough sleep. So in door to door, it's a mental game. You're out there on your feet, but it's a lot of mental pumping yourself up, just checking yourself each pitch, making these small incremental changes. And I think that's what it took is these little things that I was doing. You could tell somebody how to sell. Here's the script. Here's what you say, but it's about how you say it. It's, their nonverbal, paraverbal communication. It is about what you say to structure of, how are you closing? Are you building value? Maybe in your intro, when people tell you no, do you just go, well, and then you continue on anyways, or do you agree and just go, of course? And most people here, had different companies and just like what we do different. We do that a lot, of course, in our market where most people have a guy, or if it's someone that doesn't have anyone, of course. And most, maybe they're telling me, oh, we don't have bugs. I can, do I just go, oh, well, yeah, what about these ants? Do I come off combative or do I come off more agreeable, being able to go, yeah, of course. And, it's March. A lot of people aren't seeing, huge infestations inside just yet, but your problems are mostly going to be, outside, and it's much better to keep them out than it is, to have to get them out. Matter of fact, when you call me, it's 149 or $200 or whatever you want to charge, to start. And then so we can save you a good bit, kind of get started early, preventing pests, and then moving forward. So you got to have a good argument on, why you start now. You got to learn that urgency has to be built in the approach. There's most people they'll call you when they need you. Why'd you come to my door? I'll just look you up. Give me a card. I'll call you when I want you. And so you got to have some sort of presentation that builds urgency from the beginning, and then also at the end to help connect the dots in their head that now's the right time to buy, and not just leave me a card and I'll call you when I want you.
It's kind of like navigating what is your style. Would you say that people have their own approach going into it and kind of developing your own style that feels authentic to you?
Yeah, for sure. Because if you don't come off as yourself, you just come off fake, right? One example that I always try to help our guys understand, because a lot of times what guys are doing is they'll come off sweet. So for example, just looking at the tone of the approach, they'll come off as, "Hey, I was over at Carol's house. She likes what we do as a local company." So they're trying to come off kind and nice, and they kind of are, but they're coming off very fake and not genuine. So I always say you really want everyone's different. My style is very, I call it confidently genuine. And so my pitch isn't going to go up. It's going to be more of, hey, I was just with Tony, thought I'd meet you since we're here every 3 months for him. He likes what we do different and than what he had before, but do you have anyone that does it for you now, kind of thing. So it's more of a confidently genuine approach rather than a, hey, just stopping by, and then
Hi.
so yeah, exactly.
Just like timidly knocking on the door. Honestly, this sounds a lot like dating in a
Yeah,
weird way.
sure. Sure.
Right? Where it's like you want the person to feel confident and be sure of themselves and genuine, nice, but also sure of themselves and capable of hearing no. But also you wanting to be like, okay, this is the person for the job. This is somebody I feel comfortable with because they are comfortable themselves.
Yeah, yeah. No, everyone, they'll buy from you if they like you and if they feel comfortable with you. If they don't believe you or don't trust you at all in the approach, and most of the time, I mean, you're going to their door, right? They weren't planning on buying pest control today. That's the challenge of it. I mean, if you really break it down, like what's so hard about getting a customer to buy at the door? Well, they weren't thinking about it today. Why buy now? I'll, just buy later when I want to. So, what do we have to talk? I already have it, what do I, it's the same thing you offer, right? So why are we talking? It's like if, we can relate maybe for me, if I take pest control out of the equation and I go into like, sometimes I'll go into like Walmart or Costco and there'll be like an AT&T rep and it's like, hey, do you want internet? And it's like, well, I got internet. What do I need your internet for? That's
Yeah,
kind of how people see it, especially in our market in Atlanta. I mean, it's pest control central here. So, so many of the big guys, Orkin's based here with Rollins, and there's so many companies here. So yeah, it's definitely a saturated market. It's, getting new customers, new homeowners, that introducing new people into the pest control world, people that maybe have somebody for termite, but they don't have pest control. But also there's a lot of competing and stuff to kind of grab market share as well.
absolutely. Piggybacking off of that idea that you're in Atlanta, the market is saturated. You started ProCare in 2014. So, how did you decide to go into business, especially where there's a ton of competition?
Yeah, so the easy answer to that is it's where I grew up. I grew up in Atlanta, and so the company I was working for at the time, as I mentioned earlier, actually, I had a lot of, I had to believe if I'm gonna tell somebody I'm the best, right? I've got to be. If I don't believe in what I'm offering people, I just can't sell it because as I said, my style is confidently genuine. So if I'm not confident in what I'm selling, I can't be genuine, kind of true. And so just at my core just didn't sit well. A lot of companies, sadly, on the door in the door-to-door world are just that. They're a sales organization and they don't really back up very well what they preach, which is why retention with door-to-door companies historically and I think across the board for the most, with very few exceptions, can be pretty poor. A lot of times they try to grow too fast and they don't build enough of a company foundation. I got to a point where I talked to the company I was working for a couple of years and said, look, if we can't tweak things, and they go, oh, don't worry, we're changing some things. It's going to be better next year. I got to my third year. I sold in Houston the next year. I ran a team. I ran a sales team in LA that we recruited and trained. And I just got to a point where I said, you know what? Yeah, I just don't believe it. I can't believe in this product. So I looked at other companies to work for. My first reaction was not to do my own company. I knew there was going to be, I mean, just a lot of work. I'd take a huge pay cut. I was making six figures, with the companies I was working for in 4 months. And I went to my wife and I was like, you know what, we're gonna throw in all the chips and go all in and see how it goes. Actually, I met a guy in California my last summer, and this is kind of what triggered the light bulb in my head. I actually knocked on his wife's door, and she was like, "I'm not interested. My husband owns a pest control company." And I tried to convince her anyways. I'm just kidding. So,
You're like, listen, I'm confident and I'm genuine, and your husband, I'm sure he's great, but
he'll understand.
listen to my pitch, lady.
Get it. No, she was actually really nice. We had a good conversation. My goal in any door I knock is to be, walk away friends with anybody, whether they want to be my friend or not. That's, doesn't matter. We're at least gonna, walk away, knowing that, I'm not pushy, but you have to be politely persistent in door-to-door sales. You don't want to come off pushy, but you do have to be, politely persistent because otherwise you'll sell very little. You'll just get people that are waiting to buy. And so met this lady, and then at the end of the day, her husband pulls up in his pest control truck coming home from work, and he asked me how I was doing, and I told him my success for the day. He was like, "Wow, it's pretty good." And then first off, he said, "Why don't you do your own company?" And I was like, "Well, there's a lot I don't know. I had, certain concerns." And he sat with me for about 30 minutes and just started like knocking out all my concerns. And then at the end of our conversation, he said, do you have any kids? And I was like, my wife's actually expecting. We're gonna be having our first baby. And he's like, do it now before the kids come, or you'll be in your 60s like me, finally doing my own thing, wishing I would have been young like you, starting. And I was probably 23 at the time. And so I said, okay, wow. And I went home to my wife, and that's kind of what kind of when I finally said, you know what? Let's do it. The company I work for doesn't exist in Georgia, so there's no non-compete concerns that I have there. I can go home and not have any issues doing my own thing. And it was a rough start, kind of getting into it. That was, I guess, where we got the idea and kind of where all that started.
I love that story. I love the idea that this like magical guy just comes home in his past truck and he's like, "Come on, sit on down. Let's talk about it."
Yeah, and what's really cool, really with the story is we had our first boy in October, and then we started the company in January, and then we had a really rough kind of start with things, and then come 2 years later, we had twins. So my wife, a year later, of course, takes 9 months to make a baby, to have a baby, right? Eventually, the twins came, but I looked at that point, I said, honey, if we would have had all three of these kids, there's no way we would have gone through the first 2 years of heck with the business to get to this point. So, and then we had a little girl. She was born with a little bit of a heart condition too, which kind of took me out of work. But yeah, just kind of between the births and the bills with kids and we were living with mom and dad in the basement, at the beginning, and and then eventually the twins were coming, so we had to get a place of our own. We couldn't live in the basement anymore. By the way, I promised my wife it would only be like 3 months we lived in that basement, and yeah, she had to put up with me for a couple of years, just kind of with the business.
From 3 months to a couple of years.
Yeah, it's pretty
That's
bad.
brutal, but
It was
also like
brutal.
you got to do what you got to do. I have one child and he's a year and a half and can walk and talk and take care of himself for the most part, and I can't even imagine doing anything when he was a newborn. So hats off to you because that's incredible. Also, like good advice, like get started before you have kids because it is if you can,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
because it is a lot. I mean, like everyone says it's a lot of work. And then when you're in it, it's like it's a lot of work just to have one kid, let alone a business. I'm very
yeah.
impressed.
Let alone like, because at that stage in life, right? And other people have taken the risk, and even more so. But you definitely do take a lower risk when you don't have a mortgage. You don't have a house mortgage, right? I didn't even have a car loan. I'd paid off my car because I was making good money. I had investment rental properties that I was buying in college, doing the sales. I had a lot of assets. I had really low liabilities. I had no one depending on me. But once you have kids, and then you have a house, and now I have a lot now depending on me, right? And so kind of starting, if I would have done that and had this position, had, I guess, the financial position I have now with the kids and responsibilities I have now, then definitely would have been a bigger risk and a bigger jump.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of responsibility when it comes with kids or just starting your own business. I want to go into some of those struggles when you first started. What are some of the things that you came across when you first started ProCare and how did you navigate?
Yeah, so here's the idea we had. We're going to go to Georgia. We're going to live at mom and dad's house for a few months, right? This is why. And we were going to sell our investment. We had an investment house in Bessemer, Alabama. So I kicked the tenants out in January. So my first hang up was I thought I could just go to Georgia and take this certified out, after having this conversation with this guy in California, like I thought I could just take this test and then I'd be good. I could do my own thing. But there's restrictions. You got to work for a company. They got to recommend you. The board has to approve you to take a certified operators test, and then you can become a registered technician. And so we got to Georgia, living in this basement. I'm like, honey, I got to go work for a company for a couple of years before I can even get things going. And so I went and interviewed at a couple of the big guys, and they said, oh yeah, we'll bring you on. We just need you to bring us an MVR. And sadly, I had slid off the road in Utah once and called the cops because I didn't know. I'm Georgia boy. I didn't know what to do if you slide off the road in snow. You just call 911. They help.
You're here to help me, right?
The guy shows up. He gives me a ticket, and I was like, "What did I need you for?" He said, You better get your car out of here. You got to pay for my tow." And so I called my insurance company, and I got my own tow, so I didn't know what his tow would cost, and I didn't know if my insurance company would cover his tow. So, anyways, here was a teenage student. I got that ticket. It's funny, I even challenged the cop. I was like, I was going 30 miles an hour when I slid off the road, and there's like 20 other cars behind me that are off the road. And he goes, well, you slid off the road, didn't you? I said, yeah. He goes, driving too fast for conditions. That's what your ticket's for. I was like, oh, thanks.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
anyways, there's a lot of good cops out there. That one was a little having a bad day, I guess. So,
Yeah.
anyways, I got another one for having snow on my back windshield. So it's a lot of silly tickets, no speeding, no accidents. But yeah, so that kept me from being hired on with some of the big guys. They wouldn't hire me because of the tickets on my MVRs. And I was like, man, what am I going to do? So I went to, I met a, well, I was turning in applications. This was back in the day when you'd actually go to a place and say, here's my resume. Can I interview?
The good old days.
Yeah, it doesn't happen anymore. Anyways, there's a father-son business, and he was like, Philip's been needing to, his son is Philip. He's like, he's been needing to take his test. He's been my technician for 5 years. He could go do it for you. And I was like, you guys are willing to help me out, like, get started. So it was really cool. I worked for them, and I told them I'd work for them for free. So I worked for free for 3 months and just helped them build their business and improve some things. I sold customers, so I told them I'll get 20 customers. I was like, I've never sold in Georgia, so give me a week to 2 weeks. I'll get 20 customers for you. I started on I think it was Memorial Day, so that's when by that point I'd started Pro. But so anyways, at the beginning I worked for them one holiday, and I put on 9 customers the first day, and I remember he was like, are you sure you don't want to stick around a little longer? So I ended up putting on the 20, and I think it took me 3 days for him. And so that was part of our deal. I'd put on 20 customers for him, and then I'd work for free. I didn't know anything about termites in Georgia. That's big. And so it was kind of exchanging work for some education. And we just became good friends. Kind of cool story too is he called me at the beginning of this year. Every time I have a question, like, hey, how do you guys work this? How do you quote a pre-treatment here for this new construction, or how do you work with your builders? We're very open with each other on things, and they were very helpful for me at the beginning, and I've always been more than happy to return the favor. So anyways, we were looking at companies had been offering to buy us, they always send out these little feelers like, hey, we may be interested in buying your company. And he was letting me know that. He's like, what do you think I'm worth? And so we kind of dived into his books, and I did business, I got a business degree through school. And so I was like, I'm not an expert. I know enough to be dangerous, I guess. And in the end, he was like, honestly, I'd rather just work with you guys. We want to be part of you. So it was kind of cool that it's kind of coming full circle. We'll be kind of wrapping their business in with ours this month. So that's been a cool kind of, we're excited to have them part of us. And we've kind of felt like the same company, but we just operate in the same areas and kind of just try not to compete with each other.
Oh, that's so cool. When did this happen?
Within the last month,
That's
yeah.
very cool. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's our first kind of, company. They're just a little 3-man show. Our company's grown. We've got about 30 trucks now, and they've got 3. So they're kind of like, hey, and their business is very different, right? A lot of smaller companies, his goal was to just provide for the family. For me, I'm more of an entrepreneur, I guess, in the mindset of how do we scale, how do we create systems and training programs to get, keep quality service and make a good sales program. For him, technology is not his favorite. He's kind of older generation a bit, and they kind of did enough with the business. And he's a hard worker, works long, more. In some ways, for the amount he works, he should be making more money than what he does. So it's one of those, kind of situations where I'm hoping he'll have a much better work-life balance with us and make more money. He's done a good job taking good care of his customers, so we're excited for them to be part of us.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, you had mentioned kind of what the process is and with training and your philosophy. Can you kind of dive into that? I know that you really prioritize communication, systems you have in place with training as well. I'd love to hear about that.
So with the sales reps, really, it takes a lot of time to train a sales rep. And honestly, what I would do originally, so starting from the beginning, right, getting the right person for the job, a lot of times I'm looking for people with sales experience, and sales experience is very different from someone that's sold at Old Navy clothes, or even maybe something a little different, selling maybe a car where you're having people come in that still can be a difficult sell, to working with people that have sold like cold calling, right? Cold door to door cold calling is very different from others. And so my first thing is to make sure that it's actually what they want to do. And so there's great money in it. There's a really high ceiling because now you can sell one a day and make $100, 150, 200, or but you have the ability to sell 6 to 10. And so that pay range can be big. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're selling 6 or 10 and making a ton of money. If you hate doing it, then you're not going to last very long. And so my first goal of when I hire guys with sales is I find someone that has had success selling cold call selling, not just any sales. And then my next step is to have them watch me do it. Now I do just like anyone that's perfected a craft and they have talent with it. Sometimes these guys are like, oh yeah, this looks easy, and then
Put me
they
in, put me in.
yeah,
Yeah.
and of course I can't just throw them. I got to do some base training. But a lot of times, right there, I get a feel for, at least they get a feel for what the job would be, making sure that, hey, this is the job. Is this what you want? And before I start investing time into you, I want to make sure that it is what they want. It's not a perfect system. I still have people that don't make it, maybe even a week or 2 weeks. They realize it's a lot harder than it looks, but at least helps me kind of weed out maybe people that it's really not what they wanted, right, to begin with. So that would, I'd say, be the first step. And then when it comes to doing the sales training, I do spend at least 2 days in-house training each of my sales guys. I teach them the industry. You got to teach them. So depending on where they're coming from, to be honest, I do have very little success training people from the industry to do pest control sales. It is nicer because I don't have to teach them what pest control is. And they have at least some foundation of what pest control is. And then pricing is usually a little easier to teach someone that's from the industry. If they've had door-to-door sales, that's a different story. But if they've just been a tech or a manager at a different office or any other capacity that's not door-to-door, that they're typically, it's almost better just to train someone on pest control, teach them pest control, and then hopefully they've had, again, more of a cold calling type experience. And then after I teach them the industry and pricing, then we start going into the sales training. And I would say my philosophy with sales training is a lot of people want a script, and you can write out a script for them to read and to know. But at the end of the day, I find teaching, there's certain principles they need to understand. So it's like, okay, here's the intro, here's what you say, but why do we say that? Some companies will go, hey, I'm John, I'm with ProCare, we do pest control, so they come right out and say their name, the company they're with, and what they do. I did that in Georgia when I got here, and everybody, as soon as I say, I'm John, I'm with ProCare, I do pest control, they said, we got it, thank you, And so what I started doing is I was like, hey, you know what? I'm just gonna delay the word pest control for a minute, just so that I give myself a little bit more time. So, hey, I'm John. I was just with Tanya. We're here every 3 months for her. She likes how much more we do, keeping the bugs out of her house, and we save her money. So then, I just kind of delay that taboo word of pest control. And I didn't have to worry about that so much in Seattle because most people didn't have it. So, kind of announcing my name and what I do was fine. But yeah, there's certain principles, kind of structure and that's just the example in the intro. But then, why do we explain the service the way we do? Where do you put in pricing? And so you really want to, you need someone that knows what they're doing. A lot of times I think people try to go into like a local small company that comes from usually the service side of the industry and then starts their business. Very good technicians, knows what they're doing when it comes to controlling bugs. But, now how do we put on customers? And so you really got to either have somebody or go with someone that probably knows what they're doing to try to learn it. It definitely, there's a structure, there's an art. It's an art.
Yeah.
You got to learn the art to do it.
Yeah, I hear that it does, there is a balancing act that you are navigating while you're talking with someone. I have to ask, what is it that you enjoy about the door-to-door sales? Is there something that you do enjoy?
No, I do. I love the game. I love the competition with it. So I do enjoy it actually. I think there's been periods where I'm like, I got to get out there and go knock. But I mean, it's fun. I mean, especially when you get to a point where you're like, hey, this person told me no, we're good, man. Almost get out of here kind of tone. Like, what do you want? You're interrupting me. And then at the end, they're like, yeah, okay, see you Friday. Yeah, sounds great. Where do sign it? Here's my card. And so that's the fun. I love those sales. I walk away and then I'm like, what happened? And usually those ones are the sales that the guys that's training with me is like, what just happened? So
Say.
those are cool. I like those experiences. I usually have at least a couple of those a day. I typically will do about six or so when I get out and at least work 8 hours, and I'll have a couple that were just like, yeah, it is fun. They made me work for it, kind of feeling. There's some frustrating you do get. You got to look at the negative too. You got people that don't want you in the neighborhood. They'll tell you nobody wants you here. Didn't you see the sign at the front? Kind of thing. They'll feel like they got to speak on behalf of everybody else, and then usually I kind of laugh. So a new person would take that pretty personally, but for me, I'm typically like, well, Sarah was really happy I came by. We're going to see her on Friday. What's your schedule like?
I just got invited to her birthday party. I don't know.
Yeah,
Sarah and I go way back now. I mean, we
yeah.
just met, but
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I was at this lady's house the other day, and she was super nice. She was actually on dialysis, sadly, and we went after she bought pest control. I had to go back and get her. I think I forgot, or it didn't save or something. I had to go back and get her information again, and I was like, "Sorry, let me re-get that from you." And then I was like, "Ooh, that smells good," whatever she was cooking. She's like, "You want some?" I was like, "Oh no!" And she had bringing out this whole plate, and then I went inside. And then she had a little grandson, and we were doing some Disney voices together, and he was like lighting up, and I don't know, it was cool, just strangers, and we had just an awesome kind of conversation. First, she gave us a shot, and then so I like that relationship part of it too, and I usually have at least a couple of those, a day that we really build just a temporary friendship. But to me, that's what selling's all about, is finding a win-win. I'm here to help them get a good deal. Very confident about the service we provide. I mean, I've really felt like we've built a good just culture of people that, I picked the name ProCare because I'm professionals that care is kind of the play on. And so that's why I want. I'm like, hey, if you care about the company, if you care about the customer, then the quality is going to come. And so it's really getting our people to buy into what we're doing. And I think there's a lot of other things in there, right, to create that. But I think if you can do that right, then you can build a good service.
absolutely. For our listeners, do you have any advice if they are starting a new business and they're really in the thick of it right now? So I feel like throughout your career, you've had these people come into your life who have kind of opened up a new world for you. What would be some advice to somebody that's listening who's struggling right now?
I think if we're talking like people in our industry specifically, in the past, or probably lawn or other kind of related industries, can be very similar. We can all probably relate on a lot of just service-based customer things. See, my best advice is learning to sell. One of my favorite books as a kid was Rich Dad Poor Dad, and there's a story he tells in there where he meets a lady who is an author, and she is like, how do I'd love to be the world a renowned author like you have a book that has had such success as Rich Dad Poor Dad did. And he goes, oh, she's like, what advice would you give? And he was like, well, why don't you learn sales, go to a sales seminar. I started kind of recommending us. She's like, I don't want to do sales, I'm not in sales. She's like, that's just not for me. And he says, look at what the book says. And it says, it says world best-selling author. He's like, I'm not the world's best author, I'm the world's best-selling author. And so for us, starting ProCare was, I feel, a little reverse from the way most companies start. You usually go, hey, we have a good product, now how do we sell it? For us, it was, hey, we know how to sell pest control, but how do we create a good product that we're proud of and people can stand behind? So I would say that's the first thing, is sales, I think, is big. Other things is, at the end of the day, you got to create good systems. That's what running a business is all about. So maybe check yourself on, is our software, are we getting what we need to out of our software? Technology is not the driver of success. You learn that from a lot of books like good to great. It's not the driver of success, but it does support, the success. So if you technology can help you free up and allow you to find those drivers of success and push forward. Maybe that's your online marketing, or maybe it's door to door or whatever. But yeah, I guess that would be my advice, is certainly learning sales and then checking your systems and making sure that, for me, every time our business slows from growth, it's typically because I'm getting tied up with the day-to-day stuff. And I was actually listening to a podcast recently that they talked about someone that they're looking at strengths and weaknesses basically. And they said, hey, sometimes our greatest weaknesses are our greatest strengths. And so the point is like, if you're really good at selling, then sometimes it's hard for me to train a guy because he's fouling the job up in front of me and he's going to lose the sale. So I want to butt in and I have to really refrain. It's actually really hard for me to train sometimes, just because I got to hold myself back and just let them make their mistakes and let them fall a little bit so they can kind of learn. And so sometimes it happens a lot when we want to save customers. Like, I want to be the one to save them because I know I'm really good at saving customers, but I need Tanya or whoever to save customers so I can focus on what I do. And so sometimes I think those are the things that can really hold companies back. Are how good are you at sales? You could spend a lot of money in marketing, so you better try to close as much deals as you can that come your way. And then number two is just checking maybe your systems and your training. Are you getting yourself tied up too much into the day to day when are you working in the system, or are you working on the system? And sometimes you get really tied up working in the system.
Great. So work on that system. I think that's, or like, yeah, like looking at it holistically is what I'm hearing, as opposed to getting focused in on the minutia. Sometimes it's easier to kind of pull back and be able to see where you need to draw your attention and what you need to be working on. John, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. I have one more question for you.
Sure.
What do you wish people knew about the pest industry and the people who work it?
Yeah, so the pest industry for me has been a very relationship based industry. I just didn't know that getting into it. I thought people called you when you had a pest infestation and then you came out and did it. My dad was an Army guy growing up, and so he did it all. He was a DIY guy through and through. My mom's so glad we do her pest control now, and I didn't realize it was such a reoccurring, service that's what, really builds those relationships. But yeah, it provides a lot of opportunities for a lot of people on the sales side and just all parts of the industry. You can learn a lot from it. And I always tell our guys, like, hey, some people come here, it's a stepping stone. For me, pest control was not meant to stay. It was meant to be a stepping stone to, I was going to do business law originally, or to some other. I knew I was a bit of an entrepreneur from the beginning, and so I knew I might do something in business, but pest control wasn't what I wanted to do originally or considered, until a conversation I shared earlier, where it kind of light bulb went off there. It's definitely a great place to learn about business and about taking care of customers. And maybe you go somewhere else and you're great wherever in a different place. But if you come here, then hopefully you stay for the right reasons, taking good care of people and helping them solve their problems. So.
Amazing. John, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. We really appreciate it. And yeah, I had a blast. Thank you so much.